Hey guys, it's Yvette and I am here with week 3 of the Fort Worth Fabric Studios Altogether Spooky Mystery Quilt. So I'm really excited. I've gotten all of my fabric gathered together. These are all the ones that they wanted us to use for this week. I've read through and these are all of them. Some of my alphabetties have sort of fallen off. So this is my D fabric, E, F, G, and N. So I know that they're not, some of these aren't labeled, but they're the correct ones, I promise. And we're also using A, B, and C. So let's get going. I'm really excited. Okay. I'm just going to scooch these over because the first ones we're going to use are B and C. We have right here. Might have a little bit of jelly bean on there. Okay, now for number 1, it says use 4 of the B rectangles and 8 of the C squares. And these are 5.5 inch square, and these are 10.5 by 5.5 inch rectangles. We're going to draw a diagonal line corner to corner on the back of the fabric C squares, which are these. And we're going to place a C square on the upper left corner of B, right sides together, and stitch on the draw line. And then we're going to trim and press, and then repeat for the upper right corner. Okay, so let's get that going. Hold on one moment. Let me get my friction pen. Okay. So I'm going to just go ahead and do all of them, just so we have them done. I'm just going to take one of the black lines that's on my ruler and line it up with the bottom so that I know I'm going straight across. I'm not sure if all rulers have this, but I know that Creative Grids does. Okay, so I have all of my lines drawn diagonally across each of the C squares. So I'm going to head over to the sewing machine. We're going to sew the left side on first. We're going to do our trimming and our pressing, and then I'll come back and do the right side. So let's head over to the sewing machine. Okay, so here I am. I am sewing on first the left side, as they said. I have to tell you though, it really doesn't matter which side. You're making flying geese. It just means you have to completely do one side before you do the other. That's it. It really doesn't matter which side, but I'm going to do it exactly as they said. Okay. And then I'm going to chain piece these. Okay, so I have sewed my pieces actually onto the left side. I'm going to go and trim off everything to the top and press them. And I'm going to press them open. If you are actually going to press to the side, make sure you press to the black side, and I'll just take you with me. How about that? Okay, so I'm back over at the cutting board, and I'm going to trim first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 1/4 inch line and I'm going to put it down right on top of the line that I just stitched. And I'm using a gray thread, so it's very easy to see. Okay, so now I'm going to take these over to the ironing board and I am going to press them open. I'll take you along with me. Okay, so I am here at the ironing board, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to press each seam just to close it up. As we are sewing, we're punching a bunch of little holes in all of our fabric, and so by giving it a little bit of a press before we press to the side, or however we're going to press it, this just helps to close up the little holes that we punched in the fabric. Just makes it a stronger seam. Okay, so as I said, I'm going to press mine open. That's just my preference. You can press them to the side as they said, and that would be just fine. If you were doing that, you would press toward the black block, or the black triangle, I guess. Okay, so I have finished pressing the first side of our flying geese, and now I'm going to head over to the sewing machine and sew the second black piece over to the right side. Okay, so I have my fabric ready to go, and as you can see, well, maybe you can't see because it is a black fabric with a black line on it, but I have my line drawn across, so it goes this way, and we'll be trimming off everything to the top right. So let's get going. Okay, so here I go. I have them all stitched up. I'm ready to trim and press. Okay, I am ready to trim. So here we go. I am again putting the 1/4 inch line right down the line that I have just stitched. Okay, let's head over and press them. Okay, first I'm going to press the seams. Okay. And now I'm going to press them open. Okay, so here I have finished the flying geese, and I think they came out really nice. So I'm going to move over to the cutting board and let's get started on part 2. Okay guys, so here I am with the layout for the center 9-patch block. And what I have done is I have followed figure 2, where it says to put the F fabric, the G, the D, and then in row 2, E, N, E, and row 3 is D, G, F. And that, if you're using the fabric from the kit, then this is how it's going to look. And you want to make sure as you sew them together that you're keeping them in this direction, because the 4 cream colored fabrics are all directional. The rest of them doesn't matter. Just make sure the cream ones are facing the correct way. So the first thing they want us to do is sew row 1 together, then row 2, then row 3. After we have those sewn together, we are going to press, you just want to make sure that you're alternating which way you press your fabrics. So like row 1, you would press them to the left, row 2 to the right, and then row 3 to the left, and then that way when you flip them over to sew them together, the seams will nest. In this particular instance, I mean, I think that I could probably, because what I usually do is I can just eyeball it and see where they are to be able to line them all up. Nesting seams is nice. I've just become so addicted, quite honestly, to the way the fabric lays so flat whenever you press open. So I'm going to think about it. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark all the squares so that I can put them together. And because I like to mark. If you don't mark, that's okay. It's not a problem. So I'm going to scooch over row 2 and 3 for just a moment. And I'm going to mark these squares. Okay, so now I'm ready to go and sew these rows together. So let's go do that. Okay, so I'm sitting here with my rows and I'm going to get started sewing them, and I'm going to chain stitch them. So I'm going to do, believe me, I'm going to keep them all together, but I am going to chain stitch them. Okay, here we go. Okay, so I have finished stitching my rows together. I am first going to go and feed Jelly Bean because he's jumping all over me, and that means he's ready for dinner. So I'm going to go do that, and then I'm going to head over to the ironing board and take you with me. So let's do that next. Okay guys, so I'm back at the ironing board, and what I've decided is I am going to press either to the left or the right as they said in the instructions, so that I can show you how the seams nest, because I know some of you are quite new to quilting, and I'll explain to you why they want you to do that. Okay, so I'm going to first press my seams just to close up those holes like we always do. Okay. Let me just remind myself. F is the bats. Okay, good. I'm making sure I'm doing this right. So this one is row 1, row 2, row 3. So let's take row 1. And let's say we're going to press the seams to the right, okay? So what you'll do is whatever fabric you want to press toward, you want that fabric on top, okay? So I'm wanting to press to the right, so this fabric here is the one that I want to press toward. I'm going in that direction. So I'm going to make sure that this one is on the top. And then I'm going to just flip it over. And basically I just like hold it and just make sure that the seam is exactly as I want it to be. I set the iron on top very briefly. And then we'll do again with this one where we'll lay it flat. Use our hand to just sort of fold it over. Just make sure that that seam is exactly how we want it to be. You don't want to pull it, but you also don't want it to have any gaps. Because when you're putting squares together like this, where you want them to nest, it's just very important that, that they're all laying straight, is what I meant to say. Okay, so normally I would, especially if I were pressing open, I would turn this over and I would give it a spritz with the best press, and then I would press it again to make the seams really flat. But when you want to nest seams, I find that it's better if you don't. If there's like a little bit of a lip still left, that's what you want, because you're going to be able to feel those you're going to be able to feel the seams and that they're nesting together. So I usually don't do that until I'm done. Okay, so I'm going to just lay that out, and I'll take row 2. And we're going to do the same thing, except this time we're pressing that way. Okay, so I'm going to flip them like this. And I'm going to push that one forward. Just make sure that they're even. And that they're laying flat. And then the same with this one. We want to just lay it out, use our hands to sort of just flip it up and make sure, and you can just, I usually just eyeball it, where I'm making sure that everything looks like it's lining up and not twisting right or left. That's what I will do. Okay. And I can see there that it looks like it's going to line up just fine. And then again, for this one, now we're going toward the right again. So I want this fabric on top. You want to just make sure it's laying flat before you do your little flip. Make sure everything is going nice and straight. And this is another reason why I know that there are some of you who don't like to mark, but with seams like this, where it's very important that you're keeping your line as straight as possible, I just find that it's very beneficial to mark the lines. Okay, so now I'm going to head over to the cutting board, because I'm going to want to mark my seams, and I'll show you how, if you're pushing down on a hard surface and also between your fingers, how you can feel that the seams are nesting. Okay, so I've moved my my rows over to the cutting board, and I'm ready to mark my seams. That's the first thing I'm going to do. So I'm just going to kind of scooch this one up a little bit, scooch row 3 down a little bit, and I'm going to flip over my row 2 and mark here because it's going to lay there, and that's where I need to mark. Okay, a bit of a longer one. Okay, so I've marked my seams, and now I'm going to put them together. And let's see, when I'm doing rows like this and I'm attaching them, I will always either pin or use wonder clips, because when you get your seams nested correctly, you just don't want them to move. So this is my suggestion, that you would use something to hold all of this together, to make sure that everything is where you need it to be and that it stays there. Okay, so I'm going to flip these over, and when I do, you can see that the seams go opposite directions. So on both of those, there's a little place where you can feel that they match up perfectly. Hopefully I got that in the camera there earlier. You can see that they're going opposite from each other, and same there. One's going to the left and one's going to the right. And so do the first one where you line them up, and you can feel, and you want to make sure you feel it all the way down. Okay, because if you're attaching them kind of crooked, it'll sew crooked. It just will. So also, when you're laying it down, you can feel it on your cutting mat as well. If there were some sort of, if it was overlapping or anything like that, you would feel it. But what I feel right now is that both seams are just butting up against each other. Okay, and since this is where I'm sewing, I'm going to put my pins. I'm going to flip it the other way because that's really where I'm sewing. And I personally will put the either pins or wonder clips all the way across. I don't want it to move. This is exactly where I want it to be when I'm stitching. And I like when it looks really good, obviously, and we all do. So I just, in this particular instance, in this kind of connection, I always pin it to death. I really do. Might be overkill, but it's not going to move. And I have found myself a lot less disappointed when I do that. I just want to make sure this is all lined up exactly the way I want it. I can see that it is. Before I sew anything, I will flip it over, and I want to look at where it's matching up here as well. See, I think this part is a little off. So fix that. But everything else looks really good. It's all lined up well. So I'm going to go and I'm going to sew this seam, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to attach this one. Okay, I'll be right back. Okay, so as you can see, I have attached row 1 and row 2, and I did actually go over and press it. And I did press it open just to keep it flat, and I don't need to worry about nesting seams in this particular instance, so I just did that. And as you can see, this middle seam is laying nice and flat. So now I just need to go and attach row 3 to row 2. So let's get it attached. I'm going to nest this seam first, make sure that everything is lining up on top and that this seam feels nice, which it does. Just want to make sure I get that first. And then I'm going to go across this line, just give it another couple of wonder clips. Then I'm going to do this seam and make sure it's fitting on the top and that this is nice and nested. Okay, so now after I nested this, if you can see, I've got like this little ripple in here. Now what I do, and this normally is no problem, is I just sew very, very slowly across this. If you go too fast, sometimes your feed dogs could have like a, just pull the fabric in a way that you don't want it to, and it's going so fast that you can't catch it, right? So I just, in this particular instance, when I see there's just this tiniest little ripple, I will just sew very slowly over it, and I will also make sure that I'm using my fingers to get it exactly where I want it so that it doesn't end up with a bubble after we're done, okay? And I will pin all the way across, or wonder clip. We're going to get technical here. Okay, so I'm going to go and sew this seam, press it, and then I'll come back and we are ready for number 3. Okay, so here I am back with my square. I have pressed all the seams and I'm ready to square it up. So we need to square it to 10.5 inches by 10.5 inches. And I've just drawn a couple of lines for me to know like halfway, what halfway is. Of course, I forgot to draw them this way. Let me see if I can do that real quick. I know where it's supposed to land, so let's kind of do that. And I'm just sort of guesstimating. It doesn't have to really, in my mind, the quilt's for me. So I'm not going to sit here and go crazy about it being perfection. Close enough is good. It's only aesthetically that it has to be that way. And nobody's eye is going to be able to detect that minuscule little piece if I'm off a little. So I'm not going to worry about it. Okay, so 10.5 by 10.5. What I want to do is, I know that half of that is 5 1/4. So I'm making sure that I have, that's my 5 1/2 line. So I know that I want to put that little line I drew at 5 1/4. And I have done that. And then I'm going to scooch over the bottom of my ruler so that it's all lining up. I'm making sure that all of the lines that are going across are fairly even. So now I know this is the first cut that I want to make this 10.5 across. Okay. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to flip it over, and I am going to put this seam, which I just cut, on the 10.5 inch mark. Okay, that looks pretty good. So now I'm just going to trim off this excess. Okay, now I'm going to want to cut my bottom and then the top. So in order to do that, oh, you guys want to hear something? I just cut off the lines that I drew. That's really funny. Okay, so I could do it again though, because I know what I'm sitting there going, wait a minute, I just drew a line. That's really funny. I think it's really funny anyway. Okay. And you just need to make your measurements to be halfway through. And like I said, it just needs to be aesthetically pleasing. So as close to the center as you can. I wouldn't go nuts, guys. I really wouldn't. Okay, so that's my center. And we've already said that that was supposed to be at 5 1/4. So this is the way I want to put it. So I'm going to put my lines on the 5 1/4. I've got it there. And there on the bottom. But I also want to make sure that it looks fairly straight on the lines going across here. Because remember, these two little lines that I drew, I just eyeballed them. So I also need to sort of make sure that my lines across are falling on the same line. That way, I just know that I'm centering it more than my eyeball, was, which is much more important. A ruler is definitely straighter than my eyeball. So I've been told. Okay, so if that one is there, and I want to go over just a little bit, not over the quarter yet. And I am moving across evenly, so that's good. I know I'm sitting here and telling you not to worry too much, and then but you guys know how I am. I am just probably way too anal about this. Okay. Now, I'm just going to, since I just trimmed this line, I'm going to put my 10 1/2 inch line along there. I keep moving it. Dark one is so hard to see where the line is, or where my ruler is, I should say. Alright, I'm just cutting there. Okay. So now I have my 10 1/2 inch square for the middle. And let's start on number 3. We are going to assemble the star block. Use 4 A squares, which we have them here, for the corners. Okay, I get it. So what we're doing, and I'm going to lay it out just as in the picture, okay? So I'm going to take my A's, and the way it is running is we're going to have one corner over there. We are going to have one of the flying geese with the orange pointed down. Then we have another corner piece of A over here. We are going to take the second flying geese and point the orange toward the middle. And we'll take one of these squares, put them in the bottom left. We're going to take a flying geese and we're going to put the orange pointing toward the center. And the last one goes here. So all of the flying geese are pointing toward the center square. And the next thing that I want to do is I am going to do it row by row. So I'll do this as a row, this as a row, and this as a row, okay? So let's just, I'm just going to do that so I can scooch them over. So we're going to do row 1 first. Okay, and I am going to mark my seams. Okay, so I have all of my seams, my seam lines drawn, and I'm going to head over to the sewing machine and join these together. Okay, here we are ready to go, and I'm going to chain piece these. So here we go. Okay, so I'm ready to go and get these pressed, and I'll be back for us to mark all of our seams and make the final connections of the 3 rows. Okay, here we are, joining the row 1 and row 2, and here we go. Okay, I'm gonna go and get this pressed and the last row ready to attach to the bottom. I'll be right back. Okay, so here I am ready to do the last row. I'm adding row 3 to the 1 and 2. We're almost done, guys. Home stretch, let's go. Okay guys, so I am going to go and get this pressed, and then I'm going to show you my final block. I can't wait. Okay, here we go. There's my final square. It's a big one. I'm really loving it though. I think it looks really great. I'm very happy with how it turned out, and I hope yours turned out really well. I can't wait to see them on the Fort Worth Fabric Studio Altogether Spooky Facebook page. So don't forget to post your pictures. I can't wait to see them. Good night.